Today's story comes from Songling's Strange Stories from a Chinese studio, and it is titled The Painted Skin. Now, please listen to the first chapter. In ancient China, in Taiyuan, there was a man named Wang who, one morning, encountered a young woman running alone, clutching a bundle in her arms. She was struggling to walk. Seeing this, Wang quickly hurried to catch up with her. When he reached her, he saw she was a stunning beauty, probably around 16. He felt a sudden affection for her and asked,
"Why are you walking alone so early, looking so troubled?"
"You're just a traveler on the road, unable to understand my sorrows. Why bother asking?"
"What's troubling you? Maybe I can help. I wouldn't mind."
Sighing sadly, the woman explained,
"My parents sold me to a rich family tempted by money. But the wife of the household is extremely jealous of me. She curses me in the morning and beats me in the evening. I just can't take it anymore, so I've run away."
"Where are you going?"
"I have nowhere to go."
Wang thought for a moment and said,
"My humble home isn't far. Why don't you come stay with me for a while?"
The woman was delighted and agreed. Wang took the bundle from her and led her back to his house. Once there, she looked around and noticed no one else was home. She asked,
"Why do you live alone?"
"I'm just a scholar, and this is my study room."
"This place is perfect. If you really want to help me, we'll need to keep this a secret. Please don't tell anyone."
Wang promised to keep her hidden. That night, they slept together, and he kept her in a secret room. Several days passed, and no one found out. Eventually, Wang mentioned her to his wife. His wife, Chen, was suspicious. She thought the woman might be a concubine from some rich household and advised Wang to send her away. But Wang refused to listen. One day by chance, Wang was in the market when he ran into a Taoist priest. The priest looked at him with a startled expression and asked,
"What have you encountered?"
"I haven't encountered anything."
The priest shook his head and said,
"You were surrounded by dark energy. How can you say you haven't encountered anything?"
Wang tried his best to argue, but the priest left, muttering regretfully as he walked away.
Foolish. There are people in this world whose death is approaching, yet they remain unaware.
Wang, suspicious because of the priest's cryptic words, began to doubt the young woman. But then he thought,
"She's clearly a beautiful girl. How could she be a monster?"
he guessed that the priest might have been trying to make some money by claiming to exorcise demons. After a short while, he returned to his study, but when he tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. This made him even more suspicious, so he climbed over the wall to get in, but the door was tightly shut from the inside. Quietly, he tiptoed to the window and peeked inside. What he saw horrified him. There was a ghastly demon, its face a sickly green and its teeth sharp like jagged saws. The demon had laid out a human skin on the bed and was using a colorful brush to paint on it. In no time, the painting was finished and the demon casually tossed the brush aside, then picked up the human skin with both hands and draped it over itself. In an instant, it transformed back into the young woman. Wang was so terrified that his body trembled in fear. Without making a sound, he crawled out like a frightened dog and hurried off to find the priest. However, by the time he returned to the market, the priest was nowhere to be found. He searched everywhere and finally encountered him in the wilderness. Wang fell to his knees, begging the priest for help. The priest said,
"Let me help you drive it away. In truth, this ghost is pitiable too. It's hard for it to find a substitute, and I don't wish to take its life."
He handed Wang a fly whisk and told him to hang it on the door of his bedroom. Before parting, the priest told Wang to come to the temple of the Green Emperor if he needed anything further. Wang returned home, too afraid to go to the study, so he slept in the inner room that night, hanging the fly whisk the Taoist had given him on the door. Around midnight, he heard faint sounds outside the door. Wang, too scared to check himself, told his wife to take a peek. She saw the young woman standing outside, staring at the fly whisk but not daring to enter. The woman stood there gnashing her teeth for a long time before finally leaving. After a short while, she returned again, this time cursing.
That Taoist is trying to scare me. I won't give up the prey I've already swallowed.
With that, she snatched the fly whisk from the door and broke it into pieces, then stormed into the room. She rushed straight to Wang's bed, slashed open his abdomen, and with both hands, grabbed his heart and left. Wang's wife screamed in terror, and when the maids came in with candles, they saw Wang's lifeless body, his chest a bloody mess. Chen, his wife, was so terrified she couldn't even cry. The next morning, they sent Wang's younger brother, Erlang, to inform the Daoist. Upon hearing the news, the Daoist flew into a rage.
I pitied the creature, and yet it dared do this.
He shouted. Immediately, he followed Erlang back to the house, but the woman was nowhere to be found. The Daoist looked around and said,
Luckily, it hasn't gone far. Who lives in the southern courtyard?
Erlang replied.
I do.
It's in your house right now.
Erlang was astonished and doubted this. The Daoist asked again.
Did any strangers come to your house?
I left early this morning to fetch you from the temple of the Green Emperor, so I don't know. But I can go back and ask.
After a short while, Erlang returned and said,
Indeed, someone did come. Early this morning, an old woman arrived, asking to work as a servant. My wife allowed her to stay.
The Daoist said.
That's the demon.
He immediately set off with Erlang. Holding a wooden sword, the Daoist stood in the courtyard and shouted.
You wicked creature. Return my fly whisk at once.
Inside the house, the old woman panicked and tried to flee, but the Daoist chased her down and struck her with his sword, knocking her to the ground. With a loud tearing sound, the human skin fell off, revealing the hideous demon beneath, lying on the ground howling like a pig. The Daoist swiftly decapitated it with his wooden sword, and the demon instantly dissolved into thick smoke, swirling into a dark cloud. The Daoist took out a gourd, removed the stopper, and held it over the smoke. In the blink of an eye, the smoke was sucked into the gourd. He sealed it, tucked it into his bag, and then turned to leave. Everyone gathered to look at the human skin, which still had all its features, eyes, hands, feet, intact. The Daoist rolled it up like a scroll, stored it away, and was about to leave when Wang's wife, Chen, knelt at the door, pleading tearfully for the Daoist to bring her husband back to life. The Daoist shook his head, saying it was beyond his ability. Chen's cries grew even more sorrowful, and she lay on the ground, refusing to get up. The Daoist thought for a moment and said,
My powers are too weak. I can't bring the dead back to life. But I can point you to someone who might be able to save your husband. If you beg him, you may find success.
Who is this person?
The Daoist replied.
There's a madman who often sleeps in the dirt on the street. Try pleading with him. If he insults or mocks you, do not be angry.
Erlang, who knew of this madman, agreed. They bid farewell to the Daoist and went to the street together with Chen to search for him. They soon saw a beggar singing in the street, his nose running with snot over 3 feet long, and his body filthy beyond approach. Chen knelt and crawled toward him, and the beggar laughed.
Does this beautiful lady fancy me?
Chen explained her situation, and the beggar burst out laughing again.
Any man can be a husband, so what's the point in reviving him?
Chen, undeterred, continued pleading. The beggar then mockingly said,
How strange! The dead can be revived? Am I the king of hell?
With that, he angrily struck Chen with his cane. Chen endured the pain and humiliation, weeping quietly. A crowd gathered, forming a wall of onlookers around them. The beggar, coughing and spitting up phlegm, smeared it all over his hands, then shoved it toward Chen's mouth, saying,
Eat it!
Chen, blushing with shame, remembered the Daoist's warning. Reluctantly, she swallowed the phlegm, which felt like a wad of cotton stuck in her throat, slowly choking her as it went down, settling heavily in her chest. The beggar laughed again.
Ah! The beauty is now in love with me.
With that, he stood up and walked away without even looking back. Chen and Erlang followed him to the temple, hoping to ask for more help, but when they arrived, the beggar had vanished. They searched the temple inside and out, but there was no sign of him. Chen, overcome with humiliation and grief, returned home. Her heart ached for her husband's tragic death, and the shame of swallowing the beggar's phlegm in front of the crowd only deepened her misery. She wept bitterly, wishing she could die. As she prepared to clean Wang's corpse and place him in a coffin, no one dared come near. Chen, gathering his intestines as she wept, cried so much her voice grew hoarse. Just as she was about to collapse from exhaustion, she suddenly felt the urge to vomit. The lump in her chest surged upward, and with a gag, she threw it up. Before she could see what it was, it had fallen into her husband's open chest. Startled, she looked closer and saw it was a human heart, already thumping inside Wang's chest. Steam rose from it, swirling like smoke. Overcome with astonishment, Chen quickly pressed her hands over Wang's chest, squeezing the wound together. Every time she loosened her grip, more heat escaped. Frantically, she tore strips of silk to tie his chest shut. When she touched his body again, it was warm. She covered him with a blanket, and by midnight, when she checked, he was breathing. At dawn, Wang finally awoke. The first thing he said was,
I feel like I've been in a dream, but my stomach still aches faintly.
They looked at the wound on his abdomen, and it had already scabbed over, about the size of a coin. Before long, it healed completely. Dear listeners, this brings us to the end of today's story. Painted Skin tells the story of Wang Sheng, who encounters a beautiful woman who is actually a demon. Despite his wife's warnings, Wang is drawn to the woman. The demon rips open Wang's abdomen and takes his heart. His wife seeks help from a beggar, who demands she endure humiliation. Ultimately, she uses the beggar's aid to place her husband's heart back, bringing him back to life. The story reveals the folly of blind attraction to beauty and the true identity of the demon. The author, Pu Songling, reflected.
How foolish people can be. Clearly a demon, yet it was mistaken for a beautiful woman. And how ignorant they are. Clearly a warning, yet it was dismissed as nonsense. When one lusts after the beauty of others and seeks to possess them, one's own wife may have to swallow another's spit and phlegm. The way of heaven is skilled in retribution, but the foolish and ignorant do not realize it. How tragic!
What do you think? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. See you next time.